My full name is Thomas Redden Brunson. My friends call me Captain Salty. I'm 96 years old. I'm the oldest man, or anybody, I guess, alive in Destin. The oldest old fisherman, anyway, that ever lived here. Well, I lived in Niceville, and in 1927, my dad was a fishing hand over here with one of the Destins, and he moved the family here in 1927, and you couldn't even imagine what it was like back then, because had never been a public school here. Mr. and Mrs. Clement E. Taylor run a little, looked like kind of like a mission, and very few. Well, they had a math book and a speller. It was the only school books that I was used to having. The other was just something I didn't know about. But then there was 3 or 4 kids in my dad's family that was school age, and they counted sent a teacher over here. There was 13 kids for the first public school in Destin.
Was located.
The school was built. Uncle Billy Marler, one of the old spiritual leader of the community, built a little house over on Choctawhatchee Bay, not far back on the bay from where we are here, for a little church. And Mr. and Ms. Taylor had the school in their home, and then they moved into that to have the school. Well, then I don't remember the year that they built the school here in Destin, which is quite a school now, but things have changed a lot. About the only industry in this area was naval stores and fishing and sawmills. And my dad, they used to call it stacking lumber. That was a terminology used at the time. He worked out when lumber come out from the saw out to this yard. To go back a little bit, just about everything was more waterborne then. All of the traffic was sailing schooners, and they built the lumber yard down on the water. Most of it have the sawmill right close to that, and my daddy would stack that lumber for it to dry a little bit, and they would load it on to these little schooners that would sail into Pensacola and load it into big square rigged ships. And back at that time, there was hatches cut in the sides of the ship. The first one was just maybe a foot above waterline, and these schooners would come up alongside and they would push that lumber in. They had a roller, and they would load it down to that. They would seal that hatch off, and they'd load on down. It'd take maybe 2 or 3 weeks to load a schooner, load a ship, one of these big square rigged ships. And the naval stores, which was a lot of pine trees, and they started they call it chipping the boxes, cutting the faces of the trees for the tar to run out. Had cups down, and that's one of the things my dad did was to chip boxes and stack lumber. And he was a fishing hand. He was a fishing hand when he moved the family here to Destin. Well, we were just kind of known as redneck po folks, and it's hard to realize that how we survived the Depression. I'm glad that I lived through the Depression. The majority of the people now, especially the young folks, have no imagination as to what it was like. But We had all the fish and shrimp and oysters and crabs that we needed. We caught those ourselves, and my dad was a good gardener, and he raised a big garden. In fact, he raised enough he would share with some of the other people here. That, as I mentioned earlier, there was hardly anybody lived here. Maybe a dozen family names. Now that name spread, but the family name, like Marler or Melvin or Woodward. But that was about I doubt if there was a dozen family names that lived here at the time. But it certainly has grown, and I'm so happy that I was around to witness all of that. I went into the 8th grade, and I was the only one passed. And there would have been 8 grades with one teacher. And it was hard times, and I told my dad and mom, I said, now I'm not going to sit out there in a classroom with just one person and take the time away from the younger kids that need it more, baby. I said, I'm going to quit and get a job to help provide something for the rest of the family. And we talked about it a little while, and they finally agreed that I could do that. I went down and asked Captain Homer Jones. He was just coming in from out, he was seine fisherman, had a camp and all over here on the harbor at Destin. Asked him if he could use another hand. I might have weighed 90 pounds soaking wet at the time. And he says, can you cook? Well, being one of the oldest kids in the family, back those days, didn't have a nurse to come in and take care of most of the kids were born at home, and the older kids did the chores for a while. So he said, I'll give you a half a share to do the cooking on the boat. And to tell you how hard the times were, my half share, what fish we caught, we'd sell them, and every 3 or 4 weeks or a month, we'd go over if I had enough, and we'd get paid off. My half share of that 2 or 3 month spring season was $4 and a half. The full share was $9. It's hard to believe that a man with a family could survive making $9 in 2 or 3 months. But that's actual things that happened.